Thank you, Catherine. I will just share my screen. Bear with me. There we go. Hopefully everyone can see that presentation on there now. So, first of all, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming along. I'm just going to quickly give a broad overview of arboriculture in general. And then I'm going to get into the types of roles that you can work in within the industry, and then a little bit about how to get into the industry and what kind of training and what kind of paths you can take. So first question to ask would be, what is arboriculture? What is the arboricultural industry? Not always the most easy question, word to say, but an arborist is someone who manages trees, and someone who manages trees in areas where people live, so public spaces, gardens. So we're looking at trees that people interact with quite on an often daily basis. And there's lots of different types of arborists that you can become and work within the industry. There's a huge number of skills that are covered, and there's a lot of collaboration as well through different industries, different environmental groups. So there's a lot of potential depending on what you're wanting out of your career. So here are some of the basic groups of areas within our industry. They range all the way from contractors through to local authorities, consultancy, and training and education. And whether you want to work outside or indoors, whether you want to have more of a computer-based career or more practical, or a mixture of both, there's a huge amount of diversity of roles and opportunities within the industry. So consultancy, they tend to be highly trained individuals. They are working with trees to look for dangers and different defects, diseases with trees. They do various types of assessment. They work a lot with other professional groups, especially planners, designers, and building developers. And it's a good career to get into for progression. There's plenty of areas to move into, such as senior consultant, expert witness, which are designed to contribute in a legal environment where there's been damage or defects with a tree. Then we have training and education. So this ranges everything from college trainers and lecturers all the way through to assessors of individual skills. And also it's there to help train the next generation of arborists. So it's an incredibly important area of the industry, and there will always be a need for trainers and assessors. Then we have contractors. So contractors are those who work with trees, actually in the trees. They tend to be quite a large team. So you have your grounds crew, your climbers, and your supervisors. So again, a wide diversity of roles, even within the contractor sector of the industry. And safety is number one priority in this area, because this obviously can be a hazardous job. So there's plenty of training and skills that go along with this area of the industry. And communication is very important, which goes alongside with the safety. But this area can be quite physically intense depending on which role you take within the contractor hierarchy. And finally, local authorities. So these are people who manage trees in public spaces. They're a section of the government. And one of their main roles within that industry is a tree officer. So that's someone who basically is a guardian of trees in our public spaces, such as parks, street trees, a whole range of different environments. They would manage trees that have got TPOs, so tree protection orders, and their priority is to protect trees and the interests of trees when there are planning decisions to be made and buildings and such. For example, London tree officers actually manage 8 million trees. So it's a huge responsibility and a very important role within the industry. So why should we work in arboriculture? There are many reasons. One of the main reasons is how important trees are to our everyday lives. Trees are essential for life. They provide endless benefits. There are scientific studies that have proven that they can improve our health. They can improve, obviously, the environment in terms of pollutants and well-being. They provide habitats for wildlife and nature. So there's a huge range of benefits that we get the pride of taking care of in our daily career lives. Here you can see there's many reasons why arboriculture is awesome, as my American colleagues would say. There's a great community within the arboricultural industry. There's a huge group of people who have all come together because of their love of trees and their love of managing trees. And it's one of the best group of people that I've ever had the pleasure to encounter. We all work together. There's a great sense of collaboration and community, and it's a very nice industry to be a part of. As I've said, trees are hugely valuable for many reasons. They provide so many ecosystem services, and we as arborists get to champion and protect trees every day, which is one of the favorite parts of my job, as well as working outdoors. So there are many skills that are useful within the arboricultural industry, no matter where, which sector you're working within. Obviously, you need some sort of tree expertise, be it with biology of trees, identification of species, tree maintenance, tree risk management, depending on which area you're working in. It doesn't hurt to have a knowledge of the current pest and disease threats, which is particularly pertinent to my role. I'm actually a research technician for Bartlett Tree Experts, and I work in their research laboratory. So I do a lot of research into pest and disease threats. It helps to be self-motivated. Sometimes you have to work independently depending on the role, but it also helps to have good communication and people skills because, as I mentioned, there's a large amount of collaboration with different industries and also with the public. Quite often there's a lot of public engagement involved to try and promote the importance of trees, especially in their local areas. Organisation and record keeping helps, especially if you've got a role where you are surveying trees or making notes about specific tree structures. It helps to be able to problem solve and be able to budget depending on the role. Obviously, part of the industry is working outside, so it does help if you like that outdoor side of working. It really is beneficial to know about the current legislation of our industry, so everything from British standards right the way through to some legal legislation depending on what your role is, whether you're a consultant. And of course, if you're working for a contractor and you're specifically climbing or you're working actually in and with the trees, it certainly helps to have some of those tickets, so some of those chainsaw and tree climbing aerial rescue tickets, which I'll go on to just now. So some of the college and training providers that provide arboriculture training are shown on this slide. There are many. There's around 24 colleges that offer arboricultural training at the moment, as well as independent bodies like LANTRA. And so there's a wide range of skill sets depending on which role you're interested in. Everything, like I said, from tree climbing, chainsaw skills, right the way through to tree assessment, tree risk assessment. So there's a huge amount of training available through colleges and professional bodies that can help you to progress through your career. One of the main things about arboriculture is the Arboriculture Association. They are the professional representative body of all arborists. They offer membership through their registered charity, which has been running since 1964. They provide training and education on many different subjects. They also provide accreditation depending on your role. So they have approved contractors, they have utility approved contractors, registered consultants. There's a huge opportunity to be able to be registered as a professional within the arboricultural industry. And they would do a lot of events. So one of the beneficial things about this body is that they have many local branches, and each branch offers different events, different community aspects, and different trainings. And they offer a huge range of trainings, as you can see from this slide. Everything from soils, which is obviously my preference, all the way through to bats in arboriculture, professional tree inspection, veteran tree management. There's a huge range of different skills and knowledge sets. So if you're interested in careers in the arboricultural industry, one of the best things I can recommend is to go along to the Arb Show. It happens every year, usually towards the middle or end of May. It's a great opportunity to be able to meet people within the industry, see firsthand some of the skills that are required, equipment as well. You get a real feel for exactly what's required and which areas maybe you might be most interested in working. There's also the student conference that's provided by the Arboricultural Association for those who are studying arboriculture at college or other areas, and it provides some education, some idea of the opportunities again within the industry, and it's a really great way to come together and network and really collaborate with others in the industry. And on that note, we did have a Women in Arboriculture event scheduled for March this year, but unfortunately due to the current situation, we've had to postpone. But we are planning to continue that once things settle down with the current situation. So we'll be sending some information about that out in the near future or in the late future, depending if anyone was interested. There are so many different areas and bodies and organizations that you can go to for information on arboriculture and related industries. Here's just some of them if you're interested. And here are some useful links for careers information. The top one is the Arboricultural Association's careers advice page. And as a group, as a Women in Arboriculture group, we recently produced articles called The 12 Faces of Arb. And essentially it was an idea brought about to educate on the different roles available in arboriculture, because quite often people associate arboriculture and arborist with tree surgery and tree work, which is a very important part of it, but there's also a huge diversity and range of roles available. So we have that available as well on one of those links. And we really encourage you to get involved. It's a wonderful industry to work in. As I said, one of the biggest things is the community side of things. And now we're going to move to the question and answer section. So I will just quickly introduce our panelists. Firstly, we have Mandy Maynard. Mandy, did you want to introduce yourself very quickly?
Yeah, hi, I'm Mandy. I work for LAMTRA, who are an awarding organisation for forestry and Arb, writing, developing and delivering through our instructors and assessors all the training and qualifications that are required.
Perfect, thank you. We also have Michelle Ryan. Michelle, did you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm a Senior Arboriculture and Landscape Specialist at Transport for London. I'm also a Chartered Arboriculturalist, and I also do volunteering roles for the Arboricultural Association, acting as the chair of the Women in Arboriculture group. I'm a trustee and I'm also vice chair of the association.
Brilliant, thank you. And Vanessa Lyons, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi there. I'm currently a tree officer with Rotherham Council. I started my career in arboriculture as a tree surgeon, so I worked as a ground person and then went on to be a climber. And I've just completed the BSc in arboriculture with MySco.
Excellent, thank you. Amelia Williams, did you want to just share a bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Amelia and I'm an independent arboriculture consultant for the Arboriculture company. Previously, I was a tree officer and have got about 20 years experience in the Arb industry in a range of roles.
Perfect. And as I said, my name is Emma Shaffert. I am a research technician for the Bartlett Tree Experts Lab. I used to live in Reading, UK and work at their research lab. I'm now based in North Carolina, hence the slight twang that I've started to pick up. Been here a year and a half now. And I tend to research into soils and urban trees and soils in relation to trees. So after that, I'm just going to pass across to Catherine Nutchen. She can introduce a little bit about herself, and then she's going to take on the questions.
Okay, thanks everyone. If you could just stop sharing, that's it, there we go.
Perfect.
Yeah, so basically we're going to open out the questions to the floor basically. If you've got any questions about ARB or how to get started, then if you can just type it in the Q&A question box there. What we might do first of all is maybe to go around and ask people how they got into trees in the first place. You know, so Mandy, what first interested you in getting into trees?
Well, I'd love to say it was passion, but it was pure accident. I previously worked in marketing, and then I had the opportunity to work for Lantra, and having worked over lots of different sections of Lantra, it was absolutely forestry and ARB that got to me, and I just loved it. And so for the last sort of 4 or 5 years, that's what I've been concentrating on. And it's the most incredible world with the most incredible people. And I think it's about the most varied career you can get, which is amazing. So I've loved every second of it. And everybody at Lantra that develops is so passionate about it that you kind of just go with it. You run with that wave of enthusiasm. So yeah, I just feel very lucky to be part of it.
It's definitely a real, you know, there's so many different skills that are needed, or so many different passions that can be made the most,
Yeah.
thinking of.
And it's amazing how it affects, if you just say tree, but actually it affects almost every single part of your life, which you don't realise until you get involved in it. And then you think, why doesn't everybody know why they're so important?
We've got a question from Matthew Watson, who was, he says, I'm looking to start some sort of career in ARB or even ecology in general, but I have epilepsy, and wherever I look, people want driving qualifications. Is there any area which may be a good way to start without needing a driver's license? Which is quite a good question. Would anyone like to volunteer to help answer that one? Michelle, if you just want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, one thing that's just popped into my mind is maybe working for an arboretum or some kind of garden, or a National Trust site. I don't know if that would be an option. It's not the easiest thing to get into without any experience, but they might have some apprenticeships if you look around.
I think as well, I mean, there's a lot of walking that's involved, and I think often if you've managed to get the qualifications, but you come with that, then you know, the employer may be able to find things that don't necessarily involve driving. Is there are there other ways of getting about, perhaps with a bike or something like that? You know, that might be an option. Certainly with the electric bikes, it does open up a little bit more. And also, I mean, as Michelle said, the you know, places like arboretums, you know, and large stately homes where it's all based on one site, you know, it would be worth looking into. But I think it's definitely, you know, it's definitely worth starting somewhere and asking those questions of individual employers, sorry, because they may have the answers that you need. And, you know, it's always good to have people in arboriculture.
Research and development as well.
Yeah, well, yes, exactly. There's tree research that, you know, Emma works in that is, you know, isn't that kind of site-based stuff. Do you want to say anything about that, Emma?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so one of the things that I do is I do a lot in laboratories. Obviously, that doesn't need so much travel. It depends entirely on what area of research you want to work in. A driver's license is certainly not essential. I didn't actually have a driver's license, I think, until my 3rd year of employment. So it's absolutely possible. And also from a contractor point of view, because I work for a contractor, when you have a tree crew, I would say driving is not necessarily essential. If you're working as a grounds person or a crew on the ground, you don't have to be able to drive because you're traveling with others to a job site or to where you're working. So not as, it's preferable, but definitely not essential. And I know that Bartlett for sure would, you know, accommodate someone without a driver's license, definitely.
There are some local authorities as well, such as in Cambridge, where people cycle everywhere. So all of their tree officers just cycle around the city. So that's an option.
Yeah, I mean, Matthew he's mentioned also in ecological systems in general. I think, you know, ecologists and tree officers are actually, their jobs are quite similar in that it's often going to a site and looking at something and writing a report about it. So I think one would apply, you know, it's the same as the other. And being a tree officer, that, you know, the biodiversity aspect of where things are. I mean, I'm a community forestry manager, which means that I'm more about planting trees, but that kind of ecological system always has to be taken into account because it's an intrinsic part of, you know, the one thing links with the other. So, so yeah, I mean, I maybe would talk to, you know, to get the training, start getting into arboriculture and, you know, see if there's answers to questions that way. But there's certainly ways around, you know, not being able to drive. Okay, well, I hope that's answered your question. We've got a question from Anna Wiggins who says, does Sheffield City Council provide funded training to work in the industry within the city? I mean, I can answer that directly and say, not really, no. I mean, we've got some apprenticeships in the gardening section, but there isn't unfortunately any funded training currently. It would be great to see some, you know, something like that happening up. Does the panel know of, aware of any sort of funded training around the country? Ness, did you?
It's not specific. It's that there are pockets of money there for helping with training for like areas where women are underrepresented. So I, for example, managed to access a little pot of money when I was doing my degree because I was actually working as a tree surgeon at the time. And yeah, you know, women are underrepresented in arboriculture. So I'm just struggling now to think of the charity that I applied to. It'll probably come to me later, but there are pockets of money out there. If you go through sort of like grant finder applications, they can be quite useful. So yeah, but it wouldn't cover the entirety of training. It's just a pocket of money.
Are there any training grants available for Lantra at the moment, Mandy?
There isn't, unfortunately. We occasionally have grants, which obviously we will advertise. So it's always worth checking our website to see if there's anything coming about. But unfortunately, at the moment, there isn't anything coming through.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's something that we're going to be pushing more towards, I think, you know, to try and get those specific funded training. But like Ness says, there's often, you know, the grant finder website can be really useful if, you know, if you're looking for that kind of training, and also starting work somewhere on the ground. If you start with a consultancy or something, you can often get funded training that way. You know, I mean, we're always happy at the council to have people come and volunteer with us if they are interested in, you know, sort of finding out what, you know, a tree officer role is like or something like that. So, I mean, we can, you know, potentially offer that.
No, Tree Life, sorry to butt in. Tree Life sponsor, I think it's 2 students a year for the level 4 and the level 6, and yeah, they contribute to those courses.
Yeah, so yeah, Tree Life, I did my diploma with Tree Life in Leicestershire, sorry, and they, I mean, they provide very comprehensive training that's well respected. So it would definitely be worth looking at their website to see, you know, whether they can provide you with that kind of training. So unfortunately, there's no central hub, but it sounds like it is available. Does anyone else have anything to add to that one? Okay, well, I hope that answers your question, Anna. Stella Bolam writes, she says, with lots of talk about a green economy, are there any particular gaps in certain roles at the moment that people with no previous professional experience would be considered for? Or is this training essential? Would employers be willing to train on the job? I'll put that out to the panel?
Employers do train on the job. Obviously, they need to go through all the same training as anybody else would have to, but it can be done alongside a job role. So they can go off for 2-day courses, 1-day courses, and collectively build up their training, their qualifications alongside their experience. That's quite normal for that to happen.
Yeah, and also, I mean, from the community forestry perspective, I mean, there's at the moment we're trying to move over from doing a lot of work via contractors over to volunteers, and if you, I know from experience, having been a volunteer and managed volunteers, that it's important to make sure you invest in your volunteers and get people trained up. So I mean, there's definitely a will to do that. You know, if we were able to get funding in order to, you know, to have volunteers, then training would definitely be a part of that, and it's something that we're going to be, you know, looking into in the future to have that. And because there's so much tree planting, there's lots of noise around tree planting and trees in general. You know, I expect that there's other initiatives that are being talked around in Zoom meetings at the moment that are going to move forward with that. There's the English tree strategy that's just come out, that's very much about engaging communities with their, you know, with their, you know, with trees and things. So, so yeah, we'd hope that, you know, there are going to be funds coming that way that is going to start to get training into the, you know, into the general population that can then move into jobs, you know, in the future. It'd be good.
It's a perfect point going into the voluntary sector. Although obviously not being paid to work, you're sort of ticking 2 really important boxes. You will be getting the experience that the employer eventually needs from you, but also they will pay for your training whilst you're volunteering, which actually saves you a fortune. And that sort of, so when you're trying to move on with your career, not only have you got your experience and the fact that you've said, you know, I love this career so much that I was happy to do unpaid work, but you'll also have all the certification behind you to be able to move on.
Yeah, and did you have something to add to that, Ness?
Just about sort of entry-level work on the tools, you know, if tree surgery is something that appeals, you do need qualifications, but it is normal to sort of enter perhaps without any and be unskilled labour for a while. You know, and that's the way that a lot of people get to try out tree surgeries, to approach a company that they like the look of and that they're amenable, and do some sort of work experience with them. And, you know, sort of quite basic responsibilities of dragging brash and, you know, lifting and carrying basically. And it's quite normal for people, I think, to start that way and then go, right, okay, now I'm going to get my chainsaw license, and then move on to get their climbing tickets. So there's entry-level jobs there as well, where you don't need all of the qualifications before you start, although you obviously need qualifications if you want to progress.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that question, Stella. I hope that goes some way to answer it. I mean, I think just to kind of summarise it, it's watch this space really. That I'm hoping there will be things in the future in Sheffield, and I think generally nationally there's going to be a bigger push around trees and training around trees. It's definitely something that we'd all like to see, is more people trained in trees in general. So yes, we've got a question from Margaret Urban. She asks, is there any training or certification transferable between the US and the UK and or EU? Who knows the answer to that question? Eva does.
I'm not able to speak on specifics of things like chainsaw training or climbing training. I'm not totally sure on that, but I do know of people who have transferred within our company, at least, because we're based in the UK and America and Canada and Mexico. There have been several employees that have transferred from the UK to the US to work over here as an arborist. And I think they did have to retake certain tickets, you know, certain assessments. But on the whole, any kind of arboricultural training, be it degree level or, you know, of some sort of foundation, that is transferable. Any kind of, you know, college or similar training is definitely transferable. It's just the specific, I think, chainsaw and climbing and aerial rescue and those kind of things, you do have to be reassessed and get the specific ticket, at least in America.
Yeah.
But other than that.
Yeah, no, Emma's right on that. What normally happens is you can check and cross-reference what's involved in the training and the qualification that you took. And usually what you would need to do is do a refresher that's relevant to the country that you're then working in.
Right, thank you very much for the, I hope that helps out with that. I mean, it's yeah, there's quite a lot of links, aren't there, between the, you know, training between the UK and the US, but it's yeah, obviously there's yeah, there's a few bits and pieces there we need to think about. So, well, while we're just waiting, if there's any more questions to come in, I think just we'll just ask any more of the panel. Does anyone else want to say what first appealed to them about trees? I mean, I know, Ness, you didn't start out in trees, did you? You started out somewhere completely different.
Drugs and alcohol, yeah. That doesn't sound very good, does it? I was a drug and alcohol counsellor for 15 years. So I came into arboriculture as a second career, really. So yeah, I think I reached a natural sort of pause in my first career. I was looking to do something different and was very much casting around and thinking about it for a long time, didn't know what I wanted to do. And I've always had a love of the outdoors and of trees. And I remember speaking to a friend of mine and saying, you know, I'm interested in trees, but I don't really think that there's much of a career there for me. Because at that point I was 38 and I sort of didn't really know much more about arboriculture other than tree surgery, and thought that, you know, there wouldn't be a long-term career in tree surgery for me at you know, the age I was starting. And he said, well, what do you like about trees? I said, I like looking at them. And he said, well, why don't you become a surveyor? I didn't even know that that was an option. So that started me looking at, you know, actually looking into careers in arboriculture. And I realised I could do a degree in arboriculture. So I started doing that and then worked as a tree surgeon alongside that to gain, you know, experience in the industry. And I really actually enjoyed the career on the tools, to be fair. I wish I'd done it many, many, many years ago. I started it when I was in my 20s, but yeah. So I sort of fell into arboriculture really just through a love of trees and yeah, as a second career.
That's great. I mean, I think that's the thing. One thing that was quite interesting about sort of advertising this appeal. I'm too old for arboriculture, and I don't think it doesn't really apply. Maybe people would imagine that you'd be climbing up trees all the time, but you know, it's not necessary. I've never climbed up a tree, so. You know, and that's the range. There are the people that, you know, Amelia, you've been up a few trees and Ness has. Has anyone else been a tree climber here, apart from Amelia and Ness? So yeah, none of us are tree climbers.
I just want to stress as well, you can carry on climbing trees into like beyond. I personally don't want to do it full time as a career, but I know there's lots of people who do climb, you know, trees in their 40s and 50s and beyond. It's
yeah, age definitely isn't a barrier. We have instructors and assessors still climbing into their 60s and 70s.
Wow.
So, you know, I mean, they're incredible, and it definitely keeps them young.
True.
I would echo that, because my students, when I used to teach tree surgery, were age 16 to 57 was my oldest student. And he was the fittest I've ever seen, superb sort of tree surgeon, and literally was just starting out. He was, again, a change of career late in life and wanted to get out and do something more practical. And it was fantastic to have somebody so passionate about sort of investing that time and energy in the tree sort of industry, not realizing that sort of actually there was a whole host of things he could do, and not using age as a barrier to that. And we started on the training to also get more women and this is, I'm talking about back in sort of 2000, 2002, sort of coming through, but it was still quite limited numbers, because a lot of people felt that it was more sort of a barrier to sort of the industry, because there was only a practical way in. But there are so many entryways into arboriculture that you don't have to do the practical, but it does help. But actually there's a whole host. And like looking back at my career, I started out in a planning authority in planning administration. Prior to that, I was in London in finance, which is a bit random, and sort of ended up sort of moving from the planning section into the landscape and design team, where they had tree offices. And I hadn't ever appreciated the role of tree officers and what they did. And then I found out that you could also be a newt officer, which I thought was fantastic. And the whole experience of the different job roles out there, and the wide variety of roles is phenomenal now. That there are so many ways in, and so many interest levels you can all enjoy, at whatever age, disability or ability. There's something for everyone.
Yeah, I think that's that's great. It's really, that's a really good point. We've had another question from, is it Shite Chan? I'm sorry for mispronouncing your name there. He said, or she said, how about ISA certification, certified arborist, certified tree worker, etc. Recognition in this region. ISA, other people may know more about that than I do. Is that the American one? Emma, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, the ISA, International Society of Arboriculture, is, I believe, based in the US, and I think it is applicable for quite a lot of the different countries globally now. I would say that the Arboricultural Association accreditation is more recognised in the UK than the ISA. The ISA is offered in the UK, and you certainly can achieve those statuses, but the AA tend to be more recognised, at least within the UK industry. But I feel that the AA do offer the ISA accreditation through their body, like through their organisation. So it may be worth, if you're interested in that, or if you want to look into that more, the AA, the Arboricultural Association, may have more information on that.
Okay, well, I hope that answers your question. Okay, well, if anyone's got any more questions, then if you want to answer them now, I think we'll probably look at drawing to a close if no one has any more questions. Is there, oh, we've just got one more here. Oh, there we go. It's just a thank you very much. Yeah, I think does anyone, I mean, Amelia, you've had quite an interesting career, haven't you? I mean, you've pretty much been on all sides of it, having, you know, you've trained people and you've worked in consultancy and worked in a tree officer. Do you want to talk a little bit about what first, you know, started you out there, and maybe what it is that you like most about, you know, about all the different jobs that you've done?
I think one of the key things was having that sort of ability or opportunity, more so, to try the different roles. And when you've seen sort of management of trees, from actually looking at it from a local authority perspective, when you're owning and managing a tree population, right through to the other side, when you're actually the contractor working on the trees, and the two need to marry. So the tree officer role needs to provide the tree surgery companies with good specifications, actually viable specifications that mean the tree guys and girls can actually do the tree work in a sort of efficient manner, as well as also leaving the trees in a good condition. And from being a consultant as well, having worked on the other side, so when you're submitting reports to local authorities, that you also know what a local authority is looking for in the planning department, so you understand both sides of it. If you get a refusal, you understand where the tree officer is coming from, and as the arboricultural consultant, you might be trying new ideas, but if it's contrary to policy or outside the British standard, you need to do more justification to get your ideas across in a more coherent manner, perhaps. And it's having that balanced view from all sides, because often there is a tendency towards sort of blaming sort of one organisation or another sort of in relation to how they manage trees, but it's actually looking at both sides of it, or actually all sides, and looking at the pressures that trees and people are under. And having recently just finished being a tree officer again, it's been phenomenal to be back in a local authority sort of remit. And this time round I was actually managing a council-owned tree stock, whereas in my previous role in a local government I was actually managing the sort of trees and planning side. And the two roles are particularly very different. The pressures that you're put under, the statutory requirements under the planning role of a tree officer are much different in relation to managing a tree population, where you're managing more tree risk and you're looking at tree emergencies, call outs with tree surgeons, managing tree contractors. There's a whole raft of skills that you need in both roles, but they are very, very different. And if you're looking for a career in arboriculture, really understanding the types of role that you're going into, and even if you can go and shadow like a tree officer or a tree consultant to sort of see the sorts of things they're dealing with, and even if you're not wanting to do the practical work, but even going and shadowing a tree team safely, of course, at distance, to make sure it's one of those things where you get the experience to understand what they can and can't do. If you put out a specification that says you want, I don't know, a 5% sort of thinning of a crown, or a 2 meter reduction, is it actually physically possible for them to do? And understanding that level of link and sort of, I suppose, coordination between the different elements of tree surgery, arboriculture, and the other side that I've loved, and I ramble a lot because I love what I do, is the tree planting side, and getting involved in that. And if you're not looking to do practical, there is still the practical of growing trees. And having done bonsai, I did a previous talk a while ago about sort of the link between bonsai and arboriculture and Nawaki garden trees, pruning. You can always have a go at so many different elements of it. Looking at arboretums, one of the ways that I studied a lot, and probably Kew and places like Wisley and Hilliers Arboretum, well, I lived at, literally. I went there every day to try and do my tree ident. You photograph trees. My record library of photography of trees is phenomenal, because you're trying to grab so much information. And in my lifespan, I will never know probably even a percentage of how much and what trees do and don't do, because there is so much to learn, and you never stop learning. Every day I find something new. I follow people like Duncan Slater, and you find his latest research, or he puts something up about natural bracing and you think, oh, that changes my concept of what I thought previously about trees. And so the key thing is to constantly learn, just be open to new ideas, try new roles, try everything, because you've got nothing to lose. If you don't enjoy the practical bit, then move on to another bit. Enjoy the tree surveying bit. Just go out there, and partly my message would be go out there and enjoy trees. And I've started to move into the ecology side now. I really love like the bat element, the combination of environments and newts, and how the habitat links in with veteran trees and everything. So you don't have to stay in one path either. You can go across all sorts of tangents and sort of, I suppose, be a master of nothing, but be a sort of overviewer of everything. So
that's brilliant. I think it's so great, isn't it? I mean, it really kind of, you just managed to express how, what an enjoyable thing, and how many elements. There's something for everybody in our arboriculture. It's really
Can I just touch on something that Emma mentioned in her presentation? You mentioned about going to the Arb show, and to me, that's the perfect platform, really, if you're especially looking for a career. Things like the Arb show, APF, which happens every other year, and there's lots of other events that go on throughout the country. But it's a perfect place to go if you're unsure, because there's manufacturers there, there's developers there, there's awarding organisations there, obviously like Lantra, there's the Arb Association there. There's so many variety of careers and people to talk to. It really opens your eyes to what is going to interest you and what you want to move forward with, and they're the best people at the time to get the advice and the contacts from. It's invaluable going to the shows and events.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's definitely worth going.
Mm.
Can I just add to that as well?
All
Sorry.
right, go on, go on.
The Arb Association have branches and they run events all the time. You can go along to their events and get a really good range, or interact with a really good range of people. You know, it's not just tree surgeons, it's everyone, and they have talks on all different topics. And you know, a lot of the time it's free, sometimes it might be £10, but for, you know, a 3-hour event where you're learning so much, it's just really, really beneficial.
Yeah, it is good actually. I mean, it'd be good to get some of those things in Sheffield. It's yeah, we could deliver them from the Discovery Centre, which would be good. And that slightly brings us on to the next question, which is from John Rice, and he says, I'm currently in isolation. What would be the best online courses for me to build up my experience until a time that I can study and volunteer or work in person? And actually, it's a good time because there's still the links on the Arb Association websites. Yes.
There's all the free webinars, yeah.
Yeah. So, do you want to tell us about that then, Michelle?
Yeah, so there's currently a lot of free webinars on different topics. Amelia gave one on bonsai. That was also tied in with an ecology one. And then there's what they call in arborist question times, where there's a panel of 3 people and they get presented with a question and they have to battle it out. They'll be on there for, I think, forever, but the Arb Association are also building up their online resources in different courses. The first one, which is on there now, is on the BS 3998, which is pruning, but they are looking to keep on building on that.
Have they still got the trees one, biology of trees?
Yes, I think that was only available for a few weeks, and then it was going to get moved on to the members area, so it was only going to be available for actual members, but it might still be on there at the moment. That was,
yeah, I mean, if you can get onto there, that's really good. So it's got a lecturer from Myerscough who's really good. It's a really good webinar to look at, and gives you a complete grounding in trees and how they work. Basically, it's been good for some of the rangers for us, you know, to say, oh, you know, you must catch up. And it's, you know, just that, you know, for some it's the first time learning about that kind of tree physiology. You know, for others it's revision for people like me. You know, it's really useful to have that there. So it's been particularly good.
There's a good online one with Lantra, which is basic tree survey inspection, and you can do that online completely at the moment, which is good.
Yeah. So well, that's another aspect of trees, isn't it? What were you going to say, Ness?
Andy Hirons, who did the lecture that you just referenced, his book is also really accessible for both beginners, but also, yeah, like you were saying, more experienced people alike. I can't remember the name of it, tree biology perhaps, but it's what the lectures are based on. But that's a resource that I'd recommend personally if you've got time and a bit of money to spend. But yeah, I found that a really useful sort of reference book.
Yeah. And if you did want to go more into depth and like actually do a longer term qualification, there is the BSc and the Masters online through Myerscough.
Yeah, just completed the BSc, and they do it really well in terms of online learning. It's fabulous. You know, all the resources are out there. You get loads of access to tutors, and you can do it in a modular form as well. So you can sort of take your time over it, or you can do it to a more prescribed timescale.
What were you going to say, Emma?
I was just going to say there's another resource too called the Tree Fund website. They provide a lot of research grants and similar to different organizations, and they have a lot of webinars accessible too. They have an archive of them as well, so if you've missed any, because I think they do them roughly once a month, but they keep an archive, and they're from everything from like mycorrhizae in the root system of trees all the way through to like, you know, basic tree assessment. But they tend to be more focused on scientific projects, but they're definitely good for expanding knowledge and information. I'll try and see if I can drop the link in the chat box as well, or in the quick Q&A.
Well, if what we can do, we'll gather up all these links because I think it'd be really useful, and I'll put them on the link where the webinar will be recorded. It'll be on the Tree Week website under webinar recordings, and we'll put links to all the different training and lectures and different things that are online that we've mentioned here. And then people have access, because I have had a few emails from people that said they weren't able to make the webinar today, but they were interested in having the recording, so that'd be useful for those people as well. Does anyone else have anything to add? No, it's always hard, isn't it, when you sat in front of a screen? Well,
I would just say, don't hold back, just go for it. Don't overthink it. Just, you'll love it.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. It is such a great career to be in. It's definitely, you know, it's definitely something that I think has been, you know, there's just so much. There's so much to learn, but it's so interesting, and there's so many. Whether you're into the ecology and the biodiversity, or whether you know you like the big machines, you know, there's so many enthusiastic people around that really, you know, care about trees and, you know, and find them so fascinating. You know, that it's such a great career to be in. So yeah, I hope that that kind of wraps up our webinar today. Thanks so much to all the panelists that have been dragged in, especially Emma, because Emma Shafford's speaking from Northern Carolina, and it's what time is it there, Emma?
It's almost 8 o'clock here.
Oh, it's almost 8 o'clock in the morning. So, which is quite harsh for anyone to do that. And Emma's going to be doing a webinar about soils at a slightly easier time at 4:30, which means that it's 11 o'clock with you, isn't it? So Emma's going to be delivering webinar on soils later in the week. Yeah, I mean, we're going to say we'll put all the links on the website, and yeah, I wish you all well in your future careers in Arb.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.